Hello and welcome to JIPMAT 2025 QA-based solutions. Let's begin. Let's look at the question. Let x be the second least number which when divided by 8, 12, 20, 28, 35 leaves a remainder of 5 in each case. Then the sum of digits of x is. To begin with, this is a question on LCM models, which is usually tested in all these exams. What is the LCM model? Let us try to understand. One small change that you need to note when you are solving this question is that we are looking at the second least number, not the least number, as the question states in the original paper. Any number which when divided by ABC leaves a remainder R in each case will be of the form K times LCM of ABC plus R, where K is any whole number. Meaning, if you substitute K as 0, we would definitely get the smallest such number. Therefore, the word second least is significant here. Okay. Now, calculating the LCM of 8, 12, 20, 28 and 35 should not be a big deal. Okay. Prime factorize these. 2 cubed, 2 square times 3, 2 square times 5, 2 square times 7, and 7 into 5. Write down the highest powers of the prime bases. So you have 3, 1, 1, and 1. Therefore, the LCM is 840. Okay. Now, you could also calculate the LCM part-wise by doing the LCM of 8, 12, and 20, which is easy, which is 120, and then calculating the LCM of 28 and 35. So 120 is very easy here, and 28 and 35 are 7 times 4 and 7 times 5. So their LCMs are 140. Now, if you calculate the LCM of 12 and 14 also, you'll realize that it is 84. So therefore, the LCM of the entire set of numbers is 840. Now, you proceed with the calculation. So the number is of the form 840k plus 5. Substitute k as 1. I repeat, if we substitute k as 1, you get the number as 840 plus 5, which is going to be the second smallest such number. What would be the smallest number, you might ask? Of course, if you substitute k as 0, you will get 5, which is the smallest number. Okay, so what is expected is the sum of digits of the second smallest such number. So 840 plus 5 is going to be 845. 845 will have the sum of digits as 8 plus 4 plus 5, which is equal to 70, which is the answer. Okay, so if you look at this question now, it's a question primarily on algebraic identities and simplification, presented through a nested radical. Okay, so let us just understand how this series has evolved from a 2 plus root 3's square root all the way up to the successive terms going ahead. So you've had 2 plus root 3 under the square root. You add 2 to it and take the square root of that. Repeat this once again. So you have under the root this entire term plus 2 and the square root of all of that. So there are two things, friends, you need to understand when you want to solve such a question. First is how the series has been designed, i.e. nested radicals. Okay, so these are essentially nested radicals of the form a plus root b. Okay, the second thing that you must know is how to denest the radical. So two things. One is understanding the fact that these are nested radicals, which is very evident, but equally important is to know how to denest the radicals. Okay. Now let us understand. If you observe carefully here, what do you notice? You'll notice that these two are essentially conjugates, okay, of the type a plus root b, a minus root b. Okay. So what do you do with this? You apply the identity. Okay. You apply the identity a square minus b square. Okay, but the way it has been disguised and presented in this form makes this question interesting. So a square minus b square is a plus b, a minus b. So you go on simplifying now. 2 square is 4, minus of this entire term, which was under the square root. So now the square root is, you have removed the square root now because you've squared the term. So 2 square minus 2, which is 4, minus under root of 2 plus root 3. Now, this is the product of these two terms. Okay. Now you'll bring this term here and now repeat the process. Okay. So it's essentially a square minus b square done thrice. Okay. Or a plus b into a minus b as an operation performed thrice. So let's look at this. Now, how will this appear? If you look at it in the form a plus b, a minus b, here a is going to be 2 and b is going to be under root of 2 plus root 3. Okay. So this would look like this. Okay. A plus b, a minus b. Now, when you square this, a square minus b square, 4 square minus 2. Sorry, 2 square minus 2 is 2. And you have a minus root 3 inside. Clear? Beyond this, you again multiply this with this radical. So you're again getting a term of the form x plus y into x minus y, or a plus b into a minus b. Performing this operation yet another time, which is for the third time now, you are left with 2 square, which is 4, and root 3 square, which is 3. So what is the square root of 4 minus 3? 1, and that's your answer. If you have a look at this question carefully, prima facie, this appears to be a question on algebraic identities. But if you investigate further, you will realize that this question can be solved simply basis your understanding of exponents. Okay. So let us try to understand. So if you look at the cubes of the first 11 numbers, you don't have to go too far as to know the cubes of numbers up to 20 or 25. You just restrict yourself up to, the cubes of 11. And if you try to find out a pair such that the sum of cubes of these numbers would be 468, and the sum of those two individual numbers would be 12, which pair would that be? Okay. Now let us try to understand. 111, would that sum up to, of course, it sums up to 12, but would the sum of cubes be 468? No. If you look at 2 and 10, would that add up to 468? No. 3 and 9, there's no question. 4 and 8, no. And we have got 5 and 7. So I think this is the pair, right, which you'll eventually realize will add up to give you a 468. Another thing that you need to note here is that the cube of 5 ends with 5. The cube of 7 ends with 3. Okay, and what is special about this? That the units digit will add up to give you an 8, which is only possible in this case in context of 2 and 10, which is 8 plus 1000, but the sum is 1008. So that's ruled out. So therefore, the only possibility that remains here is 5 and 7. So you have got your numbers. Now, all you need to do is take the fourth powers of these numbers and add them. Okay. So what is important here is knowing cubes up to at least 15 as a number will significantly reduce the solving time required for such questions. Otherwise, one will have to resort to algebraic identities to solve. Okay. Now, 5 raised to 4 plus 7 raised to 4. 5 raised to 4 is 625. 625 plus 2401 would add up to give you 3026, which is the answer to the question. Can this question be solved using algebraic identities? Yes, it can. Let us see how. Okay. So, in order to be able to solve this using algebraic identities, a little bit of manipulation is required in the identity that we know of, which is a plus b whole cube, which is a cube plus b cube plus 3ab times a plus b. How will you, rearrange this identity this way? Because we need to find out, we are given a plus b, and we need to find out a into b, correct? Given a cube plus b cube, which is 468. So how will you solve further? 468 is equal to 12 cube, which is 728, minus 3 times xy into 12 because x plus y is equal to 12. 1728 minus 468 is equal to 36xy. 36xy will be effectively equal to 1260. Now, if you divide this number by 36, you get 35. 36 into 3 is 108. You're left with 18, 180. 36 into 5 is 180. So the product of x and y is 35. Now, two numbers whose sum is 12 and product is 35. I'm sure you don't need to go beyond this, to resort to any algebraic formulae or identity or a quadratic of that sort, because now you have clearly realized that x into y is 35, x plus y is 12. So either of them has to be 5 and the second number would be 7. Rest of the steps would remain same. So 5 raised to 4 plus 7 raised to 4 would add up to give you 3026, which is the answer to the question. Now, we have a question on trigonometry, and let us understand how to tackle that. First, I think when you notice something like this, it's important to understand the relation between sine and cos. So just expand this. So when you cross multiply, you get 3 sine theta minus 3 cos theta equal to sine theta plus cos theta. Therefore, effectively, 4 cos theta is equal to 2 sine theta. So you end up with an expression which is tan theta equal to 2. And once you know that tan theta is equal to 2 for a right angle triangle, okay, then what is the value of sine theta? Sine theta would be 2 by root 5. And what would be cos theta? Cos theta would be 1 by root 5. I think that's all that is required primarily because we need to find sine raised to 4 theta minus cos raised to 4 theta. Okay. So how will we proceed? Just substitute these values. 2 raised to 4 upon root 5 raised to 4. 2 raised to 4 is 16. Root 5 raised to 4 is 25. 1 raised to 4 is 1 upon 25. So it's basically 15 by 25. If you reduce this to the lowest ratio, you will get 3 by 5, which is the answer. I think this is one of the most straightforward, very, very simple questions on mixed fraction. All right, presented through simplification. What is the fraction type? It is of the type a b by c, where if you rewrite this, it will appear as a plus b by c. So if you look at all these numbers, you will see 999 is written common. Okay, so you could write 999 6 times and separate the fractions that are presented here. So 1 by 7, 2 by 7, 3 by 7, 4 by 7, 5 by 7, and 6 by 7. What do all these add up to give you? They'll add up to give you 21 by 7. What is 999 into 6? It would be 5,994. Okay, you multiply this with 6, or just subtract 6 from 6,000, which is 1,000 minus 1 into 6. Okay, so either ways, you'll end up at 5,994. How much is this? This is 3, and therefore the answer is 5,997. A very easy question and should have been attempted. It says 2 raised to 122, 4 raised to 62, all the way up to 2 raised to 130. When you add these, is divisible by which of the following integers? So clearly a question on remainders and divisibility, which, in a way go hand in hand here. What else do you notice? If you notice carefully, friends, watch this. All these powers here are having the same base, which is what? Which is 2. Okay. So all these powers, 4 raised to 62, 8 raised to 42, 4 raised to 64 again, can be expressed in the same base. So what is very important here is express the given exponents to a common base, which is 2, and then simplify. So knowing where to start solving the solution, okay, becomes very important in such cases. Okay. So let us do that. So you've got 4 raised to 62, 8 raised to 42. 4 raised to 64 and 2 raised to 130. So this can be written as 2 square. So this effectively becomes 2 raised to 124. This would be 2 cubed. So it becomes 2 raised to 126. This is 2 square. So it becomes 2 raised to 128. All right. Now, if you take 2 common from all of this, it's very evident that 2 raised to 122 is the smallest power. So that can be taken common. So this is 1 times, this is 2 raised to 2, 2 raised to 4, 2 raised to 6, and 2 raised to 8. What are these numbers essentially? This is 1, 4, 16, 64. Okay. So 64 and 16 is 80 plus 5 is 85. 85 when you add to 256 will give you 341. Now, this is 2 raised to 122 times 341. The given numbers are odd numbers. So essentially 2 raised to 122 will have no role in ensuring that they are divisible. Now just check the divisibility of this by 3, 5, 7 and 11. Is this divisible by 3? Sum of digits? No. 3 plus 4, 7 plus 1 is 8. So the sum of digits are 8. So it's not divisible by 3. Is this divisible by 5? Clearly not, because it's not ending with a 5 or 0. And is this divisible by 7? No. Okay, because the next number after 343, which would be 341, which would be divisible by 7, is 343. Okay, so this is clearly not divisible by 7. Now, if you notice this number is basically divisible by 11. So what is the answer to the question? Option D, 11. Let us check this question. Evidently a question on heights and distances from trigonometry. It says, 2 ships are sailing in the sea on 2 sides of a lighthouse. So you've got a lighthouse on either sides of which you've got 2 ships. Okay. This is how it would look like. The angles of elevation of the top of the lighthouse as observed from the 2 ships are 30 and 45 degrees respectively. So let us name these points as A, B, C, and D, which is the top and the foot of the lighthouse. B and C are points where the ships are located. So what is he trying to say? He's trying to say that this angle here is 30 degrees and this angle is 45 degrees. Okay, because they are from the either side of the lighthouse. Now, the lighthouse is 100 meters high. So the height of the lighthouse is mentioned. This is 100 meters. The distance between 2 ships is approximately equal to. Okay. So basically what is he asking you to evaluate? BC is the distance that he's asking you to evaluate. Right? How will you do that? If you look at the triangle ADB, right? Tan 45 is the ratio that you already know, which is 1, which is opposite upon the base. So if AD is 100, obviously DB is going to be 100 as well, because tan 45 is 1. Now, you've calculated DB, which is a part of the solution. Now you can calculate CD from triangle ACD. ACD. What is tan 30? Tan 30 is 1 by root 3. So 1 by root 3 meaning opposite upon base. Okay, what is the opposite sides measure? It is 100. What would be the measure of the base? It would obviously be 100 root 3. Okay, so fairly straightforward question. Now, if you just add the two, you will get the required distance. BD plus DC is equal to the required distance. So therefore, 100 plus 100 root 3 would be the value. What is root 3? Root 3 is 1.73. Okay, so therefore, it essentially acts to give you 273, which is your answer, which is option C. Again, a very, very simple, straightforward question based on the concept of median, which is from statistics. Let us read the question. Let X be the median of the given data. So the given data is, this is the data that they have given. We just need to arrange this data set either in the ascending or the descending order, as we know, because we need to calculate the median. Okay. And what is the median? It is the centralmost number from the set of observations. How many observations do we have? So here you've got 3, 6, 8, 11, 14 and 1, 15 observations. So there are 15 observations in all. Which would be the median observation? Obviously the central one, which is the 8th observation. So which is the 8th one? 3, 6, and 8. So basically 14 would be the median of these observations. Okay, so x is equal to 14, right? Now, they say that if 8 is replaced by 18, okay, so 14 is the median of these observations, which is x. Now, if 8 is replaced by 18, okay, so what would happen? This original series would look somewhat like this. So 13, 18, and so on, all the way up to 14. This is the changed series. Now, if you need to calculate the median for this, you will have to arrange this in the ascending order. And what would be the difference? Instead of having an 8 here, you will end up with 18, which would be the last term. Okay. Would that impact the median? Yes, it would. Because here, 15, which is the 8th term, would be the median. Number of terms are still 15, but the middle term, which is the 8th term, would change. So, what is the value of y? The value of y is 15. And therefore, the sum of x and y is going to be 29. So, what's the answer to the question? Option D, 29. If you read every statement presented in the question, you will realize that it's a clear question on mensuration. Consider the following statements and mark which of them are correct. Let's look at it one statement after the other. What's the first statement? It says if the height of the cylinder is doubled, the area of curved surface is doubled. What will definitely help you in such cases is knowing the formulas, friends. Otherwise, if you sit and try to arrive at the formula, that's going to take you that much more time. Okay, so know your formula as well. What has happened here is the height has doubled. So if the height is doubled, what is the curved surface area of a cylinder? Pi r square h. All right. What would be the curved surface area of this cylinder, which is the final curved surface area, which would be pi r square times 2h. What would happen to the curved surface area eventually? It would obviously double. Yes. So is the first statement true? Yes, it is. If you try to analyze the second statement, let's read it before that. If the radius of the hemispherical solid is doubled, then the total surface area becomes fourfold. Two things: hemispherical solid, radius, and the total surface area. Okay. So this is the original solid. What you're doing is you're doubling the radius. Okay. So the radius is doubled. Okay. Now, how would you calculate the total surface area for a hemisphere? The curved surface area, remember, is 2 pi r square. Okay. And therefore, this flat portion at the top would be another pi r square. Therefore, the total surface area is going to be 3 pi r square for the initial solid that was given. What is the final total surface area? It's going to be 3 pi times 2r square. So what is 2 square? 2 square is 4. And yes, indeed, the total surface area will become fourfold. So the second statement is also true. Now, if you look at the third statement, if a hemisphere and cone have equal bases and heights, then the ratio of the curved surface area is 2:1. Curved surface area, hemisphere, and cone. Very important. So this is the hemisphere, and the curved surface area is 2 pi r square. This is the cone. What they've given essentially is that the height and the radius, this radius is equal to this, and the height is equal to the height of the cone. So the height of the cone is equal to the radius of the hemisphere, because that in itself is equal to the height of the hemisphere. What will that do? That will help you convert this into a 2-variable format, which otherwise is a 3-variable structure. Okay, so this is the radius, you have the height, and you've got the slant height. But what they've done is they've converted the height of the cone or given you a relationship between the height of the cone and the radius. So how have they done that? By comparing it with the other solid. Okay, so essentially what is going to be the slant height? It's going to be r square plus r square under the root, which is root 2 times r. Now, what is the curved surface area of a cone? You might ask. It would be pi r l. And these are the things that, formulas, certain concepts or theorems which are taught in classes. If you have a habit of consistently revising them, it will definitely hold you in good stead. Okay, so it saves quite a lot of time, which you could invest solving other questions. So what is the curved surface area? Pi r L. Substitute the value of L and ensure that these two values or these two expressions are in the form of r. Okay, so the common variable you're using here is r square or r. So what is the curved surface area of the final solid or the second solid? It is going to be root 2 times pi r square. Is the ratio 2:1? Evidently it isn't. Okay, the ratio here would turn out to be root 2:1. So therefore, what are the correct statements here? Statement C is wrong. What are the correct statements? A and B only. So the answer is option C. How many three-digit even numbers can be formed using the digits 1 to 5 with repetition of digits not allowed? Okay, important points here. Three-digit even numbers. What is the concept that is tested? If obviously the concept is, or it is a part of permutation and combination, specifically number formation. Okay, so again, very, very important. Three-digit even numbers, repetition not allowed. Okay, now let's understand how this works. Let us have the three place values, which is units, tens, and hundreds place. Because there is a constraint, always begin your counting from the place where a constraint is presented. Where is the constraint presented? The constraint presented is here. How many ways can you enter, the digits in the units place? Are there 5 ways? No. There would be only 2 ways because you've got a 2 and a 4 that can be entered. So there are 2 ways. For example, if you select a 4, for every 2 ways that are available to place a digit in the units place, how many ways are there to enter a digit in the tens place? Okay, so how many ways are there? There are 4 ways now. Okay, note this. So now if you have selected 4, 4 is out of the list of numbers that can be entered here. Okay, so that's how it works. So we are just forming a sample number for us to understand. Okay, so 1, for example, if you select the digit 1, so 4 and 1 is out. For every 4 ways there are to enter the digits here, how many ways are there to enter the digits in the hundreds place? Obviously 3. Now, if you notice this, if you have entered 1 and if you have entered 4, that is out of the list here. So the only numbers that you can enter here are 2, 3, and 5. So for example, if you happen to select 5, the number that you have generated is 514, which is 514, which is an acceptable number. So how many ways can you, or how many numbers can be created essentially? There are 24 numbers that you can create. And that's your answer, which is option C. By observing the question, one will quickly realize that it's a question on time and work. Okay. That too, specifically about the concept of man days, which is very, very common. And the question format is also very, very clear. Okay. What is the concept used? The concept of man days, which is essentially M1 D1 H1 by W1 is equal to M2 D2 H2 by W2. Not necessarily having to use all the variables here. Okay. Now let's understand. 40 men can complete a piece of work in 48 days. So what is the number of man days? It is going to be M1 D1, which is 40 times 48, which is equal to 1920 man days. So for example, if they are building a wall, it would take 1920 man days for them to do that. Okay. Next, it says 64 men started and did the same work for X days. Now the statement breaks it into 2 parts. So 64 men working for X days, and after X days, 32 men have increased. So it has been done by a different number of men in terms of the workforce. Okay, so how would it look like? Part of the work has been done by 64 men, and after X days, 32 men increased. So basically, making it 96 men doing the remaining work in 16 2/3 days. 16 2/3, what's the equivalent of that? It is 50/3. So basically, these 96 men are working for 50 by 3 days in which they complete the task. So 96 into 50 by 3, 3 ones are 3 times 32. 32 into 50 is going to be 1600 man days. Now the sum of these two man days should be equal to 1920, which we originally obtained. When will that happen? That will happen when the number of man days here to complete this task by 64 men is 320. So 64 men and 320 man days would mean how many days? This would mean it would be 320 by 64, which is 5 days is the time required for these 64 men to do this part of the work. So essentially 64 men have worked for how many days? The answer is 5, which is option A. A question essentially on indices, right? But if you look at every statement and the fact that we have to evaluate every statement in the light of its appropriateness, closely looking at statement A, you will realize that this would take some time for you to figure out or calculate. So we'll come back to statement A. Let us analyze the second statement first. Uses simple laws of indices to simplify this. 243 and 9 are basically powers of 3. This is the fifth power of 3. This is the second power of 3. 3 raised to 5 whole raised to 0.16. 3 raised to 2 whole raised to 0.1. You apply the law of index, which is a raised to n whole raised to n. So you get a raised to m into n. So what would this turn out to be? This would be 3 raised to 0.8 times 3 raised to 0.2. So if the base is same, what would be the powers? The powers would be added when you're multiplying the numbers. So this would be 3 raised to 0.8 plus 0.2, which is 1. Now, is 3 raised to 1 equal to 0.3? No, not really. So I think this helps you arrive at the answer faster. Why? Because if B is not the answer, then on closely observing the options, you will realize that it's only option D that would be the correct answer. So without even evaluating statements A and C, we can directly mark the answer as option D. But for the sake of understanding, let us proceed and evaluate statement C and evaluate statement A in context of their appropriateness. Okay, so statement C is 0.00239 plus 0.000715. What will that add up to give you? 0.003105. So add carefully here, which is nothing but 3.015 into 10 raised to minus 3. Okay, so 3 decimals before 3.1, 3 decimals before 3.1. So that would be 3.105 into 10 raised to minus 3. Okay, so now these two parts cancel here. So what is the value of P? The value of P is minus 3, which is what is given here. So therefore, statement C is true. How will you evaluate statement 1? This is a standard process to do that, friends. Just equate this entire expression to be equal to K. And then treat every part of the expression piecewise. Okay, so let's look at 2 raised to x equal to K first. Then 3 raised to y equal to K. And 6 raised to minus z equal to K separately. Okay, so 2 raised to x is equal to K. If you have to free 2 of this radical, what will you say? 2 is equal to K raised to 1 by x. 3 raised to y is K. Similarly, 3 would be K raised to 1 by y. And if 6 raised to minus z is K, be careful here. 6 is going to be K raised to minus 1 by z. Now, is there any relation that you can establish between these numbers, 2, 3, 6? Yes. If you multiply 2 with 3, okay, you get 6, right? So that's essentially what we need to do here. So when you multiply these two sides or these two equations, you get 6 is equal to, using the law of index, a raised to m into a raised to n equal to a raised to m plus n. You get 6 is equal to k raised to 1 plus x, 1 by x plus 1 by y. Okay. Now, what is the next step? Obviously, the next step would be to equate these two, equate this product of 1 and 2 with the third equation. Okay. So what do you get eventually when the bases are equal? When the bases are equal, you can equate the powers here. So 1 by x plus 1 by y is equal to 1 by minus z. Bring this to the left side. What have you got? 1 by x plus 1 by y plus 1 by z is equal to 0. So effectively, statements A and C are true. Therefore, again, we come back to the same point, which is the answer to the question is option D. Arrange the following in descending order basis their perimeters. A very, very basic, simple question on elementary concept of mensuration, which is calculating the area and perimeters. A square with an area of 36 square centimeters would have a perimeter of 24, obviously, because the side length is 6 and the perimeter is 24. Now, an equilateral triangle with a side of 9 centimeters would have a perimeter of 27 centimeters. Again, very straightforward. Rectangle with 10 centimeter as length and 40 square centimeter as the area would have its breadth as 4, and therefore 10 plus 4 is 14. Okay, let's have a look at that. The breadth is 4, so 10 plus 4 is 14 times 2 is going to be 28, which is the perimeter of the rectangle. Now, if you evaluate the last statement, which is statement D, a circle with radius 4 centimeter. Radius is 4, so the perimeter is going to be 2 pi r, which is 2 times 3.14 into 4. 4 2s are 8, 14 8s are 112, carry 1. 14, 8 3s are 24 plus 1 is 25. Now, if you look at the the values in descending order, the largest is C, followed by B, then by D, and finally with A. So what's your answer? Answer is option D. Another question on elementary concept of mensuration in terms of calculating the area. Okay. So let's read the question. The cost of fencing an equilateral, triangular, and square park is same. If the area of the triangular park is 16 root 3 meters square, then the length of the diagonal of the square park is, let us look at. So this is the equilateral triangular park. The area is 16 root 3 meters square. Now, for an equilateral triangle, we already know that the area is root 3 by 4 times side square. So if you equate the two, cancel out root 3, 16 times 4 is 64. The square of a number is 64, therefore the number has to be 8, which is the length of the side of this equilateral triangle. What next? We know the perimeter of this is equal to that of the square park. Okay, so 3a is equal to 4s, which is 3 times 8 is equal to 4 times the other number. So what is the side of the square park? Evidently it is 6 meters. And this is the square park. Okay, so 6 meters each. What is the length of the diagonal of the square park? It is going to be 6 root 2, because if the square has a side a, the diagonal's length will be root 2 times a. Okay, so this would be 6 root 2. And what's the answer option? Answer is option D. At the outset, again, it's very, very clear that this is again a question on mensuration, or your understanding of volumes here, to be specific. Let us read the question. The concept tested obviously is mensuration. But what is the question? From 4 corners of a rectangular sheet of dimensions 25 by 20, a square of side 2 centimeters is cut from all 4 corners and a box has been created. Okay. What is expected is to find the volume of the box. So it would be an open structure, right? By folding it from all the 4 sides. Let us try to visualize this. This is the rectangular sheet and you're folding it from here. Okay. A sort of a fold that you've given it along the 4 edges, okay, or the 4 sides. So this was 25, this was 20, but now with these 2 cuts, with these 4 cuts that you're providing, 2 centimeters each, This would become 21, and this length would be 16. Okay, 2 and 2 cancels from here, so this is 16. Another 2 and 2 cancelling from either side of the length, so this would remain 21 now. Now, when you fold this, this is how the structure would appear. Okay, so 16 times 21 times 2. So what's the height of the box? 2. What's the length? 21. What's the breadth? 16. And therefore, what's the area? What's the volume? Sorry. It's going to be L times B times H. Okay, L times B times H. So 16 times 32. Okay, and 32 times 21 is easy. 32 times 20 is 640. 640 plus 32 is eventually going to be 672, which is option B. That's your answer. Again, a question which is very, very common, which is very, very, which most students are very familiar with. Okay, a question on quadratic equation. Let's read the question. Amit and Alok attempted to solve a quadratic equation. Amit made a mistake in writing down the constant term and ended up with roots as 4 and 3. Let us pause for a bit here and try to make sense out of this. How do you construct a quadratic equation when the roots are given? Of course, the sum of roots being minus b by a and the product of roots being c by a. The way you construct it is x square minus x times sum of roots plus the product of roots is equal to 0. Now, the first student, which is Amit, has got roots 4 and 3. So his sum of roots is 7 and the product of roots is 12. So therefore, the equation is x square minus 7x plus 12. This is Amit's equation. Okay, the way he perceived, the equation was x square minus 7x plus 12, because of which he ended up with these roots. Now, the second student, Alok, made a mistake in writing down the coefficient of x and therefore got the roots 3 and 2. So what would be Alok's scenario? Student 2, the roots are 3 and 2. So therefore, can you construct the quadratic? Yes, absolutely. Sum of roots is 5, product of roots is 6. Just plug this into this format. What do you get? X square minus 5x plus 6. Now, what is highlighted here to the left is the part which was incorrectly viewed. And what is highlighted here to the right is the part which is the coefficient of x, which is where Alok has made a mistake noting it down. Okay. But what is true nonetheless on either sides? On the left side is the coefficient of x that he has spotted correctly. That Amit has spotted correctly. And what has Alok done? He spotted the constant term correctly. Now, when you merge the two, you will get the required quadratic equation. Okay, so therefore the correct quadratic equation, if you just keep the places open and enter the correct values from here, let's look at it once again. 7 and this should be 6. So what would be the correct quadratic equation, so to speak? It would be x square minus 7x plus 6. And if you factorize this, break it into two parts, it would be x minus 6 into x minus 1, which is equal to 0. And therefore, the roots of this equation would be 6, 1, which is option B, which is your answer. Let us check the question. It says the traffic lights at 3 different road crossings change after every 48, 72 and 108 seconds. Okay. They all change simultaneously at 8:20. When will they change again? When will they again change simultaneously? It's a straightforward question based on the application of LCM. Okay. So what is the application here? That requires you to calculate LCM. Let's state this. Events occurring after a frequency of A, B or C seconds, okay, rather A, B and C seconds, will simultaneously recur after k times LCM of ABC, okay, where k is any natural number. So if you get the smallest such number, you substitute k as 1, which means we have to calculate the LCM of 48, 20, 70, 72 and 108. So you could do it by prime factorization also. Or if you look at 48 and 72 as numbers, they are consecutive multiples of 24. One is 24 times 2, the other is 24 times 3. So the LCM has to be 24 times 6, which is 144. 144 and 108, interestingly, are consecutive multiples of 36. Okay, so 36 threes are 108 and 36 fours are, is 144. So 3 times 4 is 12. So 36 into 12, which means 432 should be the LCM. 432 should be the LCM. Or if you want to go ahead calculating the LCM by prime factorization, that also works. 48, 72, 108 can be prime factorized as 2 raised to 4 into 3, 16 times 3, 2 cube times 3 square, 8 into 9, 2 square times 3 cube. Okay, 27 into 4. What would be the LCM? 2 raised to 4 times 3 raised to 3, which is 16 into 27, 432. Okay, now let us continue. 432K is what we've arrived at. Substitute K as 1. You get 432 seconds. Okay, now what is asked is when will they again change simultaneously? Convert this to minutes. Divide by 60. When you divide this by 60, you get 7.2 minutes. Okay, that's the answer. So 7.2. But now 7.2 meaning 7 minutes, 0.2 minutes. 0.2 minutes meaning how many seconds? 60 seconds, because 0.2 times 60 is 12. 0.2 minutes would mean 12 seconds. So 0.2 times 60 is going to be 12. Okay. So therefore, if you add 7 minutes, 12 seconds to 8:20, what would be the answer? The answer would be option B. A question evidently on simple and compound interest. Again, a property of sorts that can be applied. Let us understand this. It's interesting. The difference between compound and simple interests on a certain sum of money at the interest of 10% per annum for 1.5 years is 183. When the interest is compounded semi-annually, then the sum of money is. So essentially, it's an exercise of calculating the principal, which is what is required. Now, how will you do that? If you're here today and after a span of 1.5 years, okay, if you follow the normal scheme, which is the annual compounding process, the rate of interest is 10% per annum, and it is going to take you 1.5 years to repay the entire thing, okay, the entire principal back along with the interest, thereby generating this amount. Okay, so this is annual compounding. But now, is the scheme annual compounding here? Is the compounding happening annually? No, it is happening semi-annual. So that is something that we must make note of. So basically, in semi-annual compounding, what will happen is the rate of interest effectively will become half of what it was originally. So if it was 10, will be 5, and the time period would double. Okay, so it is going to be 3, but what 3? It is going to be 3 time periods. Okay, let us understand that. Exactly. Now, if you notice this, what has happened is the payment that you make is not directly at the end of 18 months, but it's at the end of every 6 months. So by the end of 6 months, you pay once. By the end of 12 months, you pay once again, and you will pay finally at the end of 18 months. So that's how the cash outflow would look like. Okay. Now, let us understand this in the context of semi-annual compounding. So basically, if you compound an amount k times, what would happen to the rate of interest? It would become R by k. And what would happen to the time period? It would become k times the original time period. So in context of semi-annual or half-yearly compounding, what would be the amount that is generated? It is going to be P into 1 plus R by 200. So R by 2, that is factored in, whole raised to 2n. So the time period becomes double. So 1.5 years now would become 3 time periods. Okay. Now, let us understand the second part of this particular question, which is what is given is 10% per annum for a period of 1.5 years. But if you go with semi-annual compounding as the scheme, as it is mentioned, then what would get applied is this. Okay. And therefore, effectively, the rate of interest is going to be 5% per half year. And the time period would be 3 time periods. So though it is 18 months, it is going to be 6, 12, and 18, making it 3 time periods when you're, when you pay the interest, okay, or when you're repaying the loan. Now, what is the rate of interest? R percent, which is R by 100, which is equal to small r in terms of a fraction. What is the difference between compound and simple interest when the sum is paid back after 3 years? It is equal to PR square times 3 plus R. Now, this is something that if you're able to recall, okay, is going to save a lot of calculation time, which would otherwise have been invested arriving at this, at this relation. Though it's not that difficult, but I think if you know that the principal, in fact, the rate of interest and the principal is same for both the schemes, I think this formula would, just help you fasten your calculation. Okay. Now this is equal to 183. This difference is equal to 183. Okay. Now how will you calculate the principal from here? Rate of interest is 5% per half year. So basically 5% means 5 by 100, which is 1 by 20. Now let's substitute these values to find the value of the principal. So P times 1 by 400 into 3 plus 1 by 20. This is going to become 60 plus 1, which is 61 by 20 into 1 by 400. 61 and 183, carefully notice, will cancel out once and thrice. Okay. So 3 times 20 square, which is 400, into 20, which is 8,000. So 8,000 into 3, which is 24,000, is the principal. Okay. So effectively, how much of solving space time is required? It's only this, equation, which you should ideally start solving the question. All that is discussed up to this point is just an explanation for us to understand the question step by step. Okay, but this is ideally supposed to be the first step if you are to solve it in a stipulated time in the exam. Okay, yeah. So what's the answer here? The answer is option B. A question here on ratio comparison. After adding 5 to both numerator and denominator of the following fractions, arrange them in ascending order of the magnitude of change in their values. Very, very important. It's not just ascending order, friends. It is magnitude of change in their values. So basically, initially, these are the values. Finally, you'll obtain values like 7 by 8, 8 by 9, 9 by 10, and 10 by 11. Now, the final minus the initial values would give you the change of their values, or the change in the, the magnitude of change in their values. Okay. So basically, what do you notice in these fractions, either of, the finally arrived values or the initial values, is the difference between numerator and denominator is same. Okay. This is one observation that you should have. You should have made by now. Now, 7 by 8 minus 2 by 3 is basically 5 by 24. Next is 8 by 9 minus 3 by 4 is going to be 32 minus 27, which is 5 by 36. 9 by 10 minus 4 by 5 is basically going to be 5 by 50. Okay. So we are writing all of this in terms of the common numerator, as you must have observed. Obviously, this could be reduced, to a lower format, which is 1 by 10, but we are keeping it as 5 by 50. And 10 by 11 minus 5 by 6 is going to be 5 by 66. So this is 60 minus 55 by 66. Now, if you notice these fractions, friends, you'll realize that these are fractions which are typically having the same numerator. So when the numerators are same and the denominators are different for a fraction whose value is less than 1, the fraction with the largest denominator is the smallest. Okay. Now, which is the smallest here? It is, fraction D. And the fraction with the smallest denominator is the largest. So which is going to be the largest fraction? It is going to be this 24, which is 5 by 24 is going to be the largest fraction. So what is the order in which this should appear? D, C, B, and A. So what's the answer to the question? The answer is option C. Let us check the question here. It says, in 4 years, an amount of 6,000 becomes 8,000 at a certain rate of simple interest. In what time, at the same simple interest rate, will an amount of 525 become 700? I think what is important is that the rate of interest is same. You'll understand why I'm saying that. Okay. So a concept evidently based on simple interest. Okay. 6,000 becoming 8,000 would mean the principal becomes P plus 4 times the interest, where I is the interest for 1 year. So what is the first step that you need to do if you solve this traditionally? The first step is calculating the rate of interest in percentage, substituting that in this setup, 525 to 700, and therefore calculating the time period. Okay, so that is traditional. That is traditionally how you would go about solving the question, which is what we are going to do here first. So the interest for 4 years is 2,000. So the interest for 1 year is going to be 500. If the interest for 1 year is 500, which is PR by 100, you calculate the rate of interest. 500 is equal to 6,000 R by 100. So the rate of interest is going to be 1/12 in terms of fraction, or in terms of percentage, it would be 8.33%. Okay. Now, when you substitute this in the required equation, what do you get? You get 700 is equal to 525. Now we need to check what is the time that this principal will take to become 700 at the same rate of interest. So R by 100 is 1 by 12. If you closely look at 525 and 700, friends, this is the third multiple of 175 and this is the fourth multiple. Okay. If that is not, if that is something that you're not able to visualize, immediately, which one can understand, then you could step by step cancel out these two. Eventually, you will realize that they reduce to give you the lowest ratio of 4:3. Okay. So first cancel it out by 5, then by 5, and then eventually by 7. So what do you get? 4:3. So 4 by 3 is equal to 1 plus n by 12. Subtract 1 from this. You get 1 by 3 equal to n by 12. So therefore, n is equal to 4 years. So what is the answer? Answer is 4 years. That said, is there any alternative through which we could approach the question? Yes, we can. And there is an alternative. So for that, one needs to understand that when principal becomes amount, okay, what is the percentage increase? How do you calculate percentage increase? It's the final value minus the initial value upon the initial value into 100. Okay, so which is essentially Rn%. Okay, so basically when 6,000 becomes 8,000, what is the percentage increase? 3:4. So the net increase here is going to be 33.33%. Okay, this is the first aspect. Now, if you switch over to the next set of values that are given, 525, and yes, the time period mentioned here is 4 years. So if you look at this, 525 becoming 700, that is also a ratio of 3:4. So if it's a ratio of 3:4, what is the percentage increase? 33.33%. Okay. So the percentage increase here is 33.33%. Obviously, with the rate of interest being same, which is what we had discussed initially, the time period also would be same. Okay. So what is the key takeaway here? That calculating the rate of interest was actually not necessary in this case. Okay. If you just looked at the lowest ratios, which translates to 3:4 and 3:4 in either case, that should suffice. And you should be able to easily mark the answer as option C, which is 4 years. And this is all that was required for us to understand that the time period in the second case also would be 4 years. Basically a question on simplification, right? But do you really need to calculate values to the t? I mean, the final decimal point? No, you don't need to. Okay, so how would you approach the question? If basically you have to match the columns, right? So you have to match A with the list of values given in the second column. So let's try to do that. If you assume this to be 260 or even 250 for that matter, if you had assumed this to be 250, 60% would be 150. Okay, so this here, the value here would be 162, right? Now, approximately 162, we'll hold on this for a bit and try to explore these values and perhaps map this one with the set of values from the second list. Okay, so if you assume this to be 6,900, okay, I'm just changing this. So if this becomes 6,900, okay, now if this is assumed to be 6,900, what is 20% of 6,900? 20% is 1380. So is it equal or even close to 162? No. 825, you can easily assume this to be 824. What is half of 824? It is 412. So again, does not map with the first value. Assume this to be about 1050. 10% is 105. 5% is 52.5. So effectively, 162.5 is going to be 15%. And this seems to map with the third one. Okay. So basically, if you just go on with the final one, so 480, you could find 8.4% of this, or you could assume this to be 500. No problem, because if you look at the set of values, friends, they are so wide apart from each other that taking 480 as 4 of even as 500 should not change the answer too much. Okay, so that leeway has been provided to you in the set of values, and that is something that is inbuilt in the set of values on either sides of the column. So if you look at the first column and the second column, look at the values carefully. Overall, that much tolerance will be absorbed, and you could still distinguish between distinguish one option or one value from the other. Okay, so just let's continue this. So 500, 8.4% of 500, 8% is 40, right? What is 0.4%? 0.4% is 2. So it's effectively 42 or roughly 40 is what we would keep it at for now. Now, so therefore 162 would map with the third one, right? This A maps with 3, correct? So can the answer be option 1? No. Can it be option 2? No. So these two options have been ruled out. Now you're left with option 3 and 4. Now out of 3 and 4, you're still, we are left with this bit of calculation. If you closely inspect or, check these values, friends, right? B is mapping with 4, so calculating it once again will not make sense. Out of C and D, you would agree that D is very, very simple. Why is D simple? Because it's just 5.5 times 250, which is basically 550%. What is 500%? It is 1250 plus 125, which is 50%. That's effectively 1375. So 1375 would map with this, with the first value from the second list. Okay. So therefore, effectively, we've got our answer. D maps with 1. So if D maps with 1, the answer here is option D. Okay. Now let us just calculate this for our own understanding to ensure that they're mapping with the correct elements in the second column. So if you assume this to be 30%, effectively, how much is this? 240. 240 is 30% is 72, and 60% of 72 is roughly 42. Okay, so this is going to be 42. If you assume this thing to be effectively 500 or approximately 500, what is going to be 85% of 500? It's 425. Now it's very clear that C here will map with the second one, which is true, and B maps with the fourth one, which is also true. So therefore, the answer is option D. A question which involves understanding of ratios and equations. Let's have a look at it. P's income is 140 more than Q's income, and R's income is 80 more than S's. If the ratio of P's and R's income is 2:3, a concept on ratios and linear equations, what is expected? We are supposed to find effectively the total incomes of, the incomes of PQRS individually. Okay. But instead of solving this by equations, which we eventually will, let us understand whether we can eliminate options. Okay. So because because R's income is 80 more than S's, can you eliminate option D? Yes, because this is not 80 more. This is definitely 120 more. Now, upon further, reading the question further, you'll realize that if the ratio of P's and R's income is 2:3, okay, just let us pause at this part of the question. If their ratios are 2:3, can option B be the answer? Really? No, because this is what? This is 1:2. So B is also ruled out. And if you look at option A also, this is 260 is to 320. For this to be 2:3, if this is two parts, this should be 390 actually, but this is 320, right? So therefore, we can very, very easily make out here from these statements just two statements and 2 points that we evaluated, that option C has to be the answer. Can this be solved using equations? Yes, it can. And that's what we're going to check. Now, to solve it using the equations, that is complete reading the question, the ratio of Q's and S's income is 1:2. Find the incomes of PQRS respective. So the first statement, P's income is 140 more than Q's. R's income is 80 more than S's. Ratio of P's and R's income is 2:3. So call it 2x:3x. And Q's and S's income are in ratio 1:2. So we'll call that Y and 2Y respectively. Now, if you just frame this in the, in a two equation, two variable setup, you get 2x is equal to y plus 140 and 3x is equal to y plus 2y plus 80. Multiply this first equation by 2, you get 4x is equal to 2y plus 280. Now you've got two equations here. Can you eliminate y? Yes, you can. And how do you eliminate that? Just subtract the newly formed equation, the previous equation from the newly generated equation. So what do you get? You get, the two y's here cancel. And therefore you're left with x, which is equal to 200. And that, virtually solves the entire set of values, or, you'll be able to find the values. So if x is 200, 2x would be 400, which is P's income. 3x would be 600, which is R's income. Now just subtract 140 from 400, you get Q's income, which is 260. And you subtract 80 from 600, which will help you arrive at the income of S, which is 520. And therefore, the answer is C. Now, again, you notice a question on mensuration. So something that we have noticed consistently over this period of about 14, 15 questions that we've solved till now, that mensuration is something either through areas or through perimeters or through volumes of different solids, something that is, frequently tested. Right? A solid brass sphere of radius 21 centimeter is converted to a right circular cylindrical rod of length 28 centimeter. The ratio of their total surface areas is, okay? Now, but what do we need to find? Rod to sphere, not sphere to rod. Okay, so remember that sequence. Now, clearly a question on mensuration. So a sphere, is melted and converted to right circular cylindrical rod. Typically, a concept of converting one volume or one object to the other. So basically, it is equating volumes. Okay, so this is 28 centimeters. So if you equate both the volumes, what's the volume of a sphere? It is 4/3 pi r cube. And what's the volume of a cylinder? It is pi r square, which is the area of the base times height, which is h. Now, pi and pi will effectively get cancelled. Okay. So 4 cancels with 28 7 times. 21 can be written as 7 cube into 3 cube. Further, you could split the 3 cubes as 3 square into 3. So this 3 cancels with this. So what are you effectively left with? You're effectively left with r square is equal to 7 square, because this 7 also cancels with one of the 7s here. So 7 square times 3 square. So what's the radius of the cylinder? The radius of the cylinder so obtained is 21. Okay. And what is it that we are supposed to do here? We're supposed to find the total surface area of the cylinder, which is the rod, to the sphere. What is the total surface area of the cylinder? It is 2 pi r square, which is the top plus bottom surface, plus 2 pi r h, which is the curved surface area. Okay, which is the curved surface area. Now, so 2 pi r times r plus h upon 4 pi r square, which is the total surface area of the sphere, right? Which will cancel out to give you r plus h upon 2r. What's the value of r? Obviously, 21. Now, if you substitute these values here, so you get 21 plus 28, which is 49, upon 2 times 21, which is 42. So 49 is to 42 would cancel out to give you 7 is to 6, which is the lowest ratio. And therefore, the answer is option B. Says the ratio of copper to zinc in alloys A and B are 3:4 and 5:9. A and B are taken separately, are taken in the ratio 2:3 and melted to form a new alloy, which is C. then the ratio of copper to zinc in that alloy is. Evidently a question on averages. Let's understand how to solve this. So there are multiple ways. One is obviously the weighted average approach, which we'll discuss. Yeah. So what's the fraction of copper that is involved here? If you look at this, 3 parts of copper, 4 parts of zinc. So that would be 3 by 7. Okay. What would be the fraction of copper in the second alloy? It would be 5 by 14 because 5 parts are copper, 9 parts are zinc. So in total, copper forms 5/14 of the total, the total mixture. Here, copper would form 3/7 of the total constituent elements. So basically 2 parts. So 2 times 3 by 7, 3 parts of the second one, 3 times 5 by 14 upon 2 plus 3. So 6 by 7 plus 15 by 14 upon 5. Taking the LCM, you get 12 by 14 plus 15 by 14 upon 5. So essentially 27 by 70 because 14 fives are 70 is the fraction of copper. So we need the ratio of copper is to zinc. So if 70 parts are available in total, out of which copper constitutes 27 parts, how much is zinc making up? Zinc will make up 43 parts out of the 70 now. So therefore the answer to the question is going to be option D. Okay. That said, this could also be tackled by a different format of presentation, a different approach on ratio, which is essentially weighted averages only. But just the way we represent it and maybe look at it is slightly different. Okay. So copper and zinc available in the ratio 3:4. So the total parts are 7. In the second alloy, they're available in the ratio 5:9. So the total parts are 14. What we do here, friends, is essentially try to avoid these fractions and ensure that because you're mixing 2 parts out of from here and 3 parts from here, 1 part in total should be same. Okay. So if the total units are 7 here and 14 here, you just calculate the LCM and ensure that you're arriving at the same total value here. So you can avoid fractions. So essentially we are, going ahead in the same manner. It's just that now 1 part here would be 6:8:14. So the ratio does not change. And 1 part here is 5:9:14. So now you'll arrive at your answer. 2 parts of this is going to be 12:16:28. 12, 16, 28. And 3 parts of this is going to be 15, 27, and 42. 15, 27, and 42. Now, if you add this up, you get the required ratio, which is going to be 27:43:70. But what is the required ratio here? It is option D. Copper is to zinc would be 27:43. So just a different format where you calculate the LCM and then compute the parts. Okay. If A plus B is equal to 2C, then find the value of this expression. Okay. The moment you read A plus B equal to 2C, friends, it should be very, very clear to you that what they're trying to talk about is 3 numbers which are in an arithmetic progression, period. After you know that it's a question on arithmetic progression, if BCA are in arithmetic progression, then we know that these differences are constant. Okay, so C minus B is equal to A minus C. And that's how, if both are equal to D, which is the common difference, then 2C will be equal to A plus B. Or as we say, twice the middle term is equal to sum of the extremes. Now, we know that A upon A minus C, this is going to be D, A minus C. Notice this. And B minus C, this is going to be minus D, because C minus B is D. So B minus C would be minus D. So it is A by D minus B by D, essentially. So what is A minus B now? A minus B is going to be twice the common difference. So 2 times D upon 2, which is 2, is the answer. Do you really need all of this to solve the question? Even the fact that it's in an AP? Let's check. If you take the standard relationship it is given and just assume simple values, right? So if A is 3, B is 1, and C is 2, then also the question can be solved, because you notice that nowhere in the option they have mentioned A, B, or C. So the options are independent of them, meaning assuming values will work, and it will work irrespective of the values that you take as long as they satisfy the given relation. So if A is 3, B is 1, and C is 2, and we solve this further, what is A by A minus C? It's going to be 3 by 3 minus 2, which is 3. B by B minus C is going to be 1 upon 1 minus 2, which is minus 1. So effectively, what are you left with? 3 minus 1, which is 2, which would be the answer. So an efficient way here, without getting into anything like a progression or, entering variables and all of that. So that time here can be saved by assuming values. Says cost price of an article is 200 more than that of article B. Article A was sold at 10% loss and article B was sold at 25% profit. The overall profit earned after selling both articles is 4%. What is then the cost price of article B? Evidently a question on profit and loss, correct? But is there anything else that you should be noticing before going ahead and solving the questions? Yes. Yes. That you could also apply allegation when you're solving the question. I repeat, the question can be solved using the concept of allegation, which is what we are just going to check. The allegation setup is very clear. Article A, article B, this is the mixture. What would be the average? What would constitute the average is profit percent. What would constitute the quantity is basically the cost price here. What is the cost price? You assume the cost price of article A to be X and that to be of B to be Y. A is sold at a 10% loss. So 10% loss means this should be minus 10. Please make note of the sign. It's not just 10, otherwise you'll go wrong. Okay, it should be minus 10. Now, B is sold at a 25% profit. So you enter this here. Overall, what is the profit or loss percent? It is 4% profit. So this 4% comes here. Next, just note the differences. This would be 14 because it would be 4 minus of minus 10, which would be 14, and 25 minus 4, which is 21, which is essentially what we required. Because now what is the ratio by law of allegation? X is to Y is going to be 3 is to 2. That's all we needed. So if this is 3C and this is 2C, the difference is 200. Okay, because article A is 200 more than article B. So if C is 200, we've got the cost price of article B, which is 2C, which would be 400. Can the question be solved using weighted averages or equations, so to speak? Yes. Let's have a look. Now, in the same setup, if B is assumed to be 100x, A would be 100x plus 200. You could assume this to be x also, would not make any difference. So just assign the respective profit percentages. The total cost would be 200x plus 200, obviously. This is 10% loss. So this would be minus 20 minus 10x. This is 25% profit. So this would be 25x. How much would this add up to give you, friends? This would add up to give you 5 minus 10x. Okay. And how much is this, how much is he making overall? Overall, he's making a profit of 4%. Okay. So this would be 25x minus 10x is 15x minus 20. I'm sorry. So this should be 15x minus 20. And overall, you're making a 4% profit. So if you just calculate 4% of this, this would be 8. And so would this value be 8. So it's going to be 8x plus 8. Now, what you need to do is just equate these two, which, this thing you arrive at by adding profits of A and B respectively, or loss for A and profit of B. And this you arrive 8x plus 8 by doing this computation on an overall basis. So for A plus B together. Okay. So what would this result in? 15x minus 20 is equal to 8x plus 8. 7x is 28. So x would be 4. And if x is 4, so what would 100x be then? 100x would be 400. And therefore the answer would still be option B. Can this also be solved using options? Because now we are discussing multiple ways of solving it. Yes, it can. So if you just start by plugging the value of B as 300, just be careful with what you're substituting. So if B is 300, friends, A would be 500. The total would be 800. these profit percentages are given to you, or loss percentage. This would be minus 50, which is the loss. 25% would be 75. So the delta here should be, or the sum here should be 25 and not 32, which is 4% of 800. So that's the problem there. So therefore, option 1 is ruled out. How would your second option appear? If B is 400, which it is, A would be 600, 10% loss, so you're losing 60 rupees. 25% profit means you're gaining 100 rupees. So 100 minus 60 is 40. And 4% of 10,000 is also 40. Okay, so because the two tally, we'll stop here and we can comfortably mark option B as the answer. A question clearly on probability, if you read it carefully. What does it say? A speaks truth in 75% of the cases and B in 80% of them. If A speaks truth 3/4 of the times, he's lying on 1 out of every 4 instances. Okay. And if B is speaking truth in 4 out of every 5 instances, he would lie in 1 out of every 5 of those instances. Okay, so this is the this is the setup. Now, in what percentage of cases are they likely to contradict each other in narrating the same instance, or in narrating the same incident? What does that mean? It means this, right? So when A is lying, B is speaking truth. And when A is speaking truth, B is actually lying. That's when they are actually contradicting. Okay. So what is the required probability? When A speaks truth, B does not. And when B speaks truth, A does not. Okay. So therefore, that is what essentially contradiction means. Okay. So 3 by 4 into 1 by 5 would be 3 by 20. And 4 by 5 into 1 by 4 would be 4 by 20. So 3 plus 4, which is 7 by 20, of course, into 100. We want the required percentage. This is just the ratio. 21s are, 25s are, 7 5s are is 35. 35, option C would be the answer. Let us look at the question here. A car owner, it says, buys petrol at the rate of 17, 19 and 20 rupees per liter, respectively, for 3 consecutive years. Compute the average cost per liter if he spends 6,460 per year for the 3 consecutive years. Okay. So an interesting question. Basically, it's an application of weighted average. Okay. So let us understand how to, evaluate that. Now, what is interesting to note here is that these numbers, if you notice, 17 times 19, which would be 324 minus 1, which is 323, into 20 would effectively result in 6460. So these numbers have a lot to do with this value. Okay, so that is something that you need to make out when you're solving the question, which I think you'll eventually realize that if you factorize 6460, into prime numbers, it would be basically 17 into 19 into 2 square into 5. So you could keep this as 20 because the price here is 20 rupees per liter. But this is an important insight that we've just talking. Now, if you formulate this in terms of the table, year 1, year 2, year 3, okay, average price per liter times the quantity, giving you the total. So the total amount spent every year is going to be 6460, right? So what is the total that he spends? 6460 into 3. Okay, that is going to be 19280, or rather 19380. Okay, so 19,380. Now, what is the quantity that he will spend here? So just divide this thing. Divide this by 70. So don't look at 6460 as 6460, but a product of 17, 19 and 20. If you divide this by 17, what are you left with? 19 times 20. That's why we did this, right? Now, if you divide this by 19, what are you left with? 17 times 20, which is 340. Divide this number by 20. Now, what are you left with? 323. If you add these three, effectively, the total would be 900 plus 120 and 23. So 143. So basically, the total is going to be 1043. This we just calculated a while ago, and this is going to be 1043. So what's the average going to look like? The average would be 19,380 divided by 1043. Okay. So I hope this part of the computation and the calculation is clear. Now we need to just think a step ahead and avoid calculating, finding the answer exactly, at least as far as these two calculations are concerned, because this is 19 and this is 21. Clearly, if you notice, if you multiply this 19 times, the number is going to exceed 19,380. Okay. So in fact, 1040 into 19 itself is going to be 19,760. Okay. So this is just exceeded 380. So forget option D. D and C therefore are ruled out. Okay. Just because the multiples are far more higher than what you actually need. Now you're caught between 18.49 and 18.58. Now this is interesting. Just to differentiate between these two values, you calculate 18.5 times the number. So what is 1043 into 18? 1000 into 18 is 18,000 plus 720 plus 54, which is 774. So 18,774. 1043 into 0.5, which is half, is essentially 521. And if you add the two, you get 1043 into 18.5, which is 19,295.5 or roughly 19,300. Even that is okay. So you realize that this value is lesser than this, which means this number is greater than 18.5. So if it is greater than 18.5, then the answer has to be option B. Okay. So you use approximations smartly to solve such a question. The concept tested here is percentages, evidently. Let's read the question. Three numbers A, B, C are such that A is 40% less than B and C is 40% of the sum of A and B. So how would you approach this? Simply assuming B as 10, I think should suffice. If B is 10, obviously A is going to be 6. What is the sum of A and B in that case? It would be 16. And what is 40% of 16? It would be 6.4. Okay, so that finishes with the assumption part of the question. Now the difference between A and B, what's the difference? 4. Okay, is what percent of C? A very simple, straightforward question. Should have been solved. Okay, so this is 4 upon 6.4 into 100. So if you assume this entire thing to be X, it would be 4 by 6.4 into 100, which is essentially 40 by 64 times 100. If you reduce this to the lowest ratio, you would get 5 by 8 into 100. We know that 1/8 is 12.5. So 5/8 is going to be 62.5%. Okay. So what's the answer option? Answer is option C. Four people are chosen at random from a group of 3 men, 2 women, and 4 children. Okay, a total of 9 people. The chance that exactly 2 of them are children is, okay, again, a question which should ideally not be left alone and it should be solved immediately. A question evidently on a combination of permutation and probability. Okay, so this is how, the scenario looks like. You're selecting exactly 2 children. So basically it should be what? 4C2. Out of these 4 guys, you're selecting 2. And out of the remaining 5 members, you will select 2 because you need to form a team of 4. You need to form a team of 4. So therefore, these 2 and these 2. So any 2 out of these 5 and 2 from these 4. Upon the total possibilities is how much? This is the favorable outcomes upon the total outcomes. What will be the total outcomes? 9C4. And how do you calculate this? 4 into 3 by 2. 5 into 4 by 2. So this is 10 times 6, which is 60. 9876 divided by 4 factorial. Okay, so this is the faster way to do it. 4 factorial is 24. 8 6 is 48. So 48 by 24 is 2. 9 7s are 63 times 2 is going to be 126. So you have 60 by 126, which is the ratio. And if you reduce it to the lowest form, you get 10 by 21. Okay, so what's the answer to this question? The answer is option D. have a look at this question, essentially based on simplification. But what is even more important is to understand that there's an element of algebraic identities which is hidden here, okay? Which if you miss out on would take, some time for you to solve this question. Let's look at it further. So if you look at the question this way, these terms 4.5 minus 3, 4.5 minus 3, 4.5 minus 3, 3 minus 2, 2 minus 4.5, 2 minus 4.5. If you look at them in tandem, how would that appear? If you call this A, this is B, and this is C, this expression would be A square by BC plus B square by AC plus C square by EB. So such questions have been frequently tested in JIPMAT in the past. You could check that from the past year solutions that are available on our YouTube channel. Now, if you simplify this, you get A cube plus B cube plus C cube upon 3ABC. Closely observe the value of A plus B plus C. What is this? A plus, this is A, this is B, this is C. So all values cancel out each other. So effectively leaving you with 0. Is that an important result? Yes, it is. What is the identity that is related with this particular question? It is A cube plus B cube plus C cube minus 3ABC is going to be A plus B plus C into this entire expression. Now, if A plus B plus C itself is 0, okay, so then A cube plus B cube plus C cube is going to be equal to 3ABC. It's going to be equal to 3ABC. Now, this is the result that we want and we can use here, okay? So 3ABC in the numerator and 3ABC in the denominator. So therefore, ABC and ABC in the denominator. So the ABCs cancel each other and therefore what's the answer? The answer is 3. Evidently a question on profit and loss. Just the values seem to be slightly, off. So let's be careful when we are calculating. That's all. Selling price is 1965 and the loss is 25%. Okay. So SP is 1965, loss is 25%. So if you're losing 25%, if you assume the cost to be 4x, what would be the selling price? It would be, there would be a loss of X rupees. So the selling price would be 3x. From 3x equal to 1965, you could calculate the value of X, which is 655. 655 times 4 is going to be, the cost price, which is essentially how much? 2720. Okay, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, 2620. So if the selling price is 3013, then what would be the profit percent? So if this is 2620, when you increase it by 393, you get 3030. Now let's understand this carefully. If you calculate 10% of the number, it is 262. And another 5% of the number, it's going to be 131. If you add the two, you would realize that this is exactly equal to 15%, which is the answer. So the answer is option C, 15%. You have a question on ratio proportion now, finally. So 11,550 has been divided amongst ABC such that A gets 4/5 of what B gets and B gets 2/3 of what C gets. So this is a standard statement that we have been used to, watching and solving from our textbooks and the practices that we do, right? So A is 4/5 of B and B is, so therefore A by B is going to be 4/5. B is 2/3 of C. So therefore B by C is going to be 2/3. Now, can you write all of this in one go? Yes. What's the connector here? The connector here is B. Okay. So this ratio can be written as 8/10, which is the LCM of 5 and 2. And this particular ratio can be written as 10/15, which is again writing this in context of having the connector's value similar. So 8/10, 10/5. Now you could write everything in one go. So this would look like 8:10:15 is to 33, which is the total number of elements. So 8 parts, 10 parts, 15 parts. So the total would have 33 parts. Now, what is asked? How much more does C get in comparison to A? So compared to A, how much more does C get? C gets 7 more. So if 33 parts are 11,550, one part would be 350 because 33 threes is 99. You're left with 16. So 165 means 33 into 5. Okay. And you have a 0 as, at the end. So 350, one part is equivalent to 350 rupees. So if one part is 350, 7 would be how much? 35 into 7. What is 35 into 7? 245. So 2450 would be the answer. So this brings us to the end of the QA section of JIPMAT.